Hello and welcome to the Mindful Men podcast, a show helping men to open up about manhood. My name is Simon Rennie and my aim is to get men talking. From mental health to fatherhood and everything in between, Mindful Men creates a safe space for conversation. Now, before we get into this episode, I want to say a huge thank you for joining me. It means a world for you to join me and talk about men's issues. And if you love what you hear, please subscribe and share the episode with your mates. You can also join the conversation on Instagram and YouTube, and I'd love to connect with you there. But for now, sit back, relax, and let's get mindful. G'day guys, and welcome to another episode of the Mindful Men podcast. I'm your host, Simon Rennie, and today we're getting mindful about life after death, mental health, and mindfulness. I'm really excited today. I've got John Shearer on the line from Hervey Bay, Queensland. How are you going, John?
Oh, I'm going excellent. Thanks, Simon.
Welcome to Queensland. It's a nice part of the world that you've moved up to.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really enjoying the salt air, especially. It's great.
It's a nice part of the world. I'm envious. I live in Sunshine Coast, a little bit down the road, but I love going up to Hervey Bay when I get a chance. So now, John, you're a mindfulness master, a hypnotherapist, and lived experience trauma coach. Bit of a CV.
Yeah, I see myself as a trauma coach for sure because of my lived experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might just share a little of my story if you like, Simon.
Yeah, I'd like to open up with my guests sharing their story. So yeah, the mic's over to you. Let us know a bit about who you are and how you come to be where you are today.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Yeah, in 1982, on my dad's 65th birthday, actually, I died in a truck crash in Victoria.
Wow.
And my dog was killed and obviously I was revived and I regained consciousness sometime later in Kilmore Hospital. It's a terrible name, isn't it? Kilmore. But anyhow, that's how it was. I was pretty smashed up and I needed operations and things, on my back, and I was pretty beat up. But the worst part of it was getting stuck in the mental health system for 15 years. Because later that year, I had what was diagnosed as psychosis. And of course, psychosis or hearing voices, automatically you'll receive some sort of diagnosis, that's for sure. And I did. And that was probably the worst thing that happened to me, really. But anyhow, I went through times of being suicidal, depressed, manic, you name it. I spent time in mental health units, 15 years. And then in 1997, after mental health professionals told me that what I had was incurable, that I'd have to take medications the rest of my life and I'd never work again. And I was actually pensioned off. And so I got my miracle in 1997 when on what was to become World Mental Health Day, 10th of October in 1997, which will be 25 years this year.
Yeah, wow. Yeah.
An old friend of mine who I hadn't seen for 20 years, he was passing through town and he had what he called a spiritual prompt to come and knock on my door and share his story. And that led to my spiritual awakening. I had a newfound perspective on dark and light, if you like, just keeping it very simple, dark and light. And I got my life back.
Yeah.
And he has no idea what he did for me that day. And I haven't been able to find him ever since. It's like he disappeared. I check social media sometimes, even phone books. I can't find him. He may not even be alive. I don't know. But I hope I do find him one day because, like I said, what he did for me that day, he has no idea. And that's why, I'm a big fan of the ripple effect because I became part of his ripple. And then, like I often say, it is always my hope that the people who are touched by my ripple then create a ripple of their own. And that way we can change the world. We can, one person at a time. I really believe that. I also believe that that's the only thing that will change the world as well. So how do we create a ripple? By sharing our story. It's amazing. That's why I love what you do, because I really believe that sharing our stories is the best hope we have of overcoming stigma around mental health, especially. Yeah,
You've touched right there on the purpose of Mindful Men is, to share stories from people from different walks of life, men and women across the globe as well. And I've reached out to people in the US and the UK, and I'm really enjoying these conversations. And as you say, to break down the stigma of talking about what's on our mind. And it doesn't have to be mental health. It could be, there's so many other things that are taboo topics, like our finances and politics, religion, spirituality. They're all things that some people really struggle to talk about, but they really impact their lives. So it's great having this kind of platform and speaking to people like yourself as well, to share these stories. That's central to what we're doing at Mindful Men.
yeah, yeah. Keep it going, Simon. That's awesome. And I'll certainly share this talk on my social media, because I really believe all this time, 25 years now. I must say, though, in the early days, I got my life back with my newfound perspective on dark and light, or love and fear, if you want to put it that way. That was enough to get my life back and get going again. But it wasn't really until 2009 when I found mindfulness and started a mindful practice of my own 13 years ago, because I was still having unhelpful and negative thoughts, like we all have. We've got that inner critic and we beat ourselves up and all the rest, but especially blokes. And we don't really share our stories, or, how you going, mate? Oh, good.
Yeah.
Even if they're going shit, because we don't open up. Girls are much better at it than we are, that's for sure. So I was still having those unhelpful and negative thoughts, and also, past trauma, thoughts from the past revisiting me. When I started a mindful practice in 2009, it didn't take too long, and those stories and unhelpfulness and negativity and all the rest of it sort of took a back seat. That's why I'm very passionate about what I do, not only because of my own story and my own journey and how I got sucked into the mental health system, like so many are, and told that I couldn't be cured. And, sometimes people are under court orders to take medication even. And these days I help those people get off those orders. But mindful practice, that's what I really love talking about. And you see in my background, that's my logo. Be mindful, pause, connect. And if you Google that, you'll find me. I've made it my thing for many years now. So I'll just spend 5 minutes and explain that, if you like, Simon.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about it.
Be mindful, pause, connect. Be mindful is the key thought that I teach people to use. Anytime they do notice those unhelpful and negative thoughts, or they notice their mind in the past, which can make them depressed, or their thoughts in the future, which can make us anxious, then we use the key thought, the instruction actually, from our heart. From our heart to our mind, we say, be mindful. We tell ourselves, be mindful. And then we allow that to trigger a pause. It only takes a few seconds. We pause our mind, and in that pause, we connect. And we connect in 3 different ways. We connect with where we are, using our 5 senses, sight, hearing especially, but also smell, taste, and touch if you're with a partner. We connect with who we're with full presence. And that's really important, not thinking about what to say next or having any agenda, just being fully present. Like you're excellent. When I'm talking, you're fully present with me, and vice versa. And we sense that. You know when you're talking to someone if their mind's 1,000 miles away. They're just not home, are they? And the third part of the connection is connecting with our source energy, with our spiritual selves, if you like, with our soul, our spirit, whatever you call your higher power. Connect with it, because once we start creating a little silence and connecting with that nothingness where everything is, all the great spiritual masters throughout history, and painters and musicians and writers, but we don't have to be a famous person, of course, to do this. They all realize that they're in fact channels. They're channeling from that nothingness, that place of silence.
Mm.
And out of that nothingness, well, it turns on our creativity and switches on our intuition. And it's such a deceptively simple practice. Be mindful, pause, connect. And once you start doing that on a daily basis and throughout our day, it becomes a new habit
Mm-hmm.
that you will get your life back. It's amazing. I encourage anyone watching this podcast to start, get cracking on your mindful practice. Now, a lot of people have the knowledge, have a lot of knowledge, but we need to practice, put it into
Yeah.
practice. That's the important thing.
You've
Yeah.
touched on a few things there that I guess the mindful component from Mindful Men comes from mindfulness practice. It's derived from my own experience of burnout in 2020, but also my lived experience of depression and anxiety and obsessive compulsive disorder for 30 years. And my mind races like you wouldn't believe, like a million thoughts. It seems like every minute, a million thoughts are coming into my mind, and it gets so bogged down. And particularly when burnout happened, for 30 years, I could live with it and I managed through it pretty well. But when burnout happened, my body pretty much just stopped and I couldn't think straight and I couldn't get through the cloud and the mist that was hanging over my head. So I started, working with a mental health social worker on mindfulness practice and grounding myself. Because as you said, my mind was elsewhere. It wasn't where my feet were. So I struggled with being present with my kids and my wife and even just being present in moments. So going for a walk or run, I was on autopilot. I had the blinkers on. I wasn't, looking at the beauty of the world and how it operates and so forth. But finding mindfulness and practicing that has certainly helped me ground myself and be where my feet are and appreciate the moments in time and the people in time that are with me at that moment. And it's really useful tool. And you can do it silently. I had this discussion with somebody else on the podcast a few weeks ago, and you can do it in silence and you don't have to show anybody that you're doing it. So a good tool I use is when I'm walking, for example, and my mind is racing and I'm not present. And this is usually when I'm feeling anxious about something. I might brush my hands across a bush as I walk past it and feel the leaves in my hand, or grab some off the tree and crunch them in my hand. And you get that texture in your hand, the crunching sensation. And it really does help. It's a simple tool, but it really does help bring me back to that moment. Or another one I love to use, and I've used this with clients previously in my social work practice, is we used to look outside the window and just watch the trees as in the wind and just take notice of how the trees look and the leaves look as the wind brushes through them and the colors, how they change and so forth. And it's stuff that you can do at your office desk. It could be at the kitchen table, you can be out driving or wherever you are. And if you're feeling like your mind is just not present, something as simple as these types of things can really ground you in the moment, bring you back to the moment, because the present moment is the only real moment that we have any control over as well. And even then, we don't really have a lot of control over the present moment. We're experiencing the world as it is. So you've really touched on some really good stuff, strategies there for grounding and mindfulness. And I've since gone and studied more around acceptance and commitment theory with Dr. Russ Harris, which I love his work. He makes mindfulness really easy and links mindfulness with our values and committed action based on our values, and which kind of links in with your higher purpose as well. When you know your values, you have a bit more of a clear direction of where you're going and what makes you feel good and what makes you not feel good as well. And so I really love this concept that you've got here. But I want to take you back before we'll go into mindfulness a bit further later on. But before you had your truck accident, what was your perspective on mindfulness back then, or it wasn't something that was even on your radar?
Not even on my radar. And even in 2009, just 13 years ago, well, I surfed the internet to see what the latest things in mental health were, because we were moving from Wagga Wagga to Grafton at that time. And I thought, what was I going to do? And so I surfed the internet to see what the latest things in mental health were. And when you surf the internet, you find what you're looking for. You're meant to. It's just how it works. And what I found was that book, The Happiness Trap by Dr. Russ Harris. So I was prompted to buy the book. I loved it and fell in love with mindfulness. That's how my journey started into mindfulness, thanks to Dr. Russ Harris. I've got to say though, because prior to 2009 and after my spiritual awakening in 1997, I found my purpose in selling pool tables. And then my wife and I opened a pool hall, Shearer's Q Sport, in the main street of Wagga Wagga. And we installed 16 pool tables and a jukebox. And we had all 7 local high schools come in for school sport. And we had army weekends and we were running competitions and leagues. And we did that for 6 years. And it was beautiful. In my last year of coaching, I'm just going to beat my own chest a little bit here now. 4 of my juniors from Wagga Wagga, which is a country town, really, a big one, but filled the semi-finals of the Australian Championships.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they beat all the boys from the capital cities and everything else. And they started calling me Super Coach after that. But the difference between all those boys really was the mind. And I used to use the caveman theory I came up with. I've always thought about or compared us to the cavemen, you know, the ancient ways of the caveman compared to the modern man. And anyhow, part of my coaching strategy is to just think back to the days of the caveman. All he had to do was really come out the front of the cave and have a stretch and decide which way he was going to go hunting. And on his hunt, and when he had his kill in sight, their food, and, you know, he's throwing his spear, is he thinking about how to throw the spear? Is he thinking about the distance or the wind? Is he thinking about anything at all? No, he's fully in the moment. He's in the zone, I used to call it. He's in the zone. And because he's practiced with his spear, he just purely on instinct, he'll release that spear and hit his mark. And it's the same shooting pool, you know. These boys, they practice and practice and practice. And they look at the shot and they know exactly where they need to put the white ball for the next shot. And they're not thinking about the consequences if they miss. You can never have that fear of losing, you know, and I've seen that in a lot of players actually. And you can apply this to all sports too. We need to be fully in the moment, you know, to perform well. Yeah, so in a way, I was teaching mindfulness, without realizing it, because I know from 10,000 hours of studying the mindfulness, it's in all cultures, all around the world. It's most often probably not called mindfulness, but you'll find it, even in Aboriginal culture, because my grandmother was taken away from her Aboriginal mother because she had a white father and placed in a white home to be raised as a maid. And consequence of that was she was an angry woman. And then my mother was an angry woman, and, you know, and we still see that generational anger in our Aboriginal communities. But where I was living on the East Coast in Bunjalung language, there's a word Ghana, G-A-N'-N-A, Ghana. And Ghana is a practice taught by the guru of the tribe going back millennia to help overcome trauma. So, you know, if there was a death in the family, for example, and someone's traumatized, they go to the spiritual guru of the tribe, and every tribe had one, and taught Ghana. And they were sent into the bush to practice deep listening, listening beyond our thoughts. And you know, you talk about walking and rubbing a bush and different things. When we go into nature, and that can simply be a walk around the block, we don't have to actually go bush. But when we connect and listen deeply beyond our thoughts, and we connect, then, you know, nature speaks to us. It's so true. And that's the spiritual part of a mindful practice, because no doubt in my mind, a mindful practice, a true mindful practice, it is also taught scientifically as well. You know, they talk about the amygdala and the frontal lobe and all this stuff, and how if we're in a meditative state, we're calm compared to if we're angry or fired up or whatever. Anyhow, you know, Ghana practice it's there. In the Northern Territory, it's called Dadiri because there's
Mhm.
different dialects around Australia. That
Yep.
Diri, it's probably bit more well known. So anyhow, we sort of went back onto mindfulness again.
No,
Yeah.
and that's what I like about it, because you're right. It does. There are the scientific modalities for it, but there's also, it's just the everyday stuff that we can do, and we don't have to be experts in it. We just have to tune into it and open up our world to this different way of healing. Not everything's sitting in the therapy room getting counseling. Not everything's medication as well. This is something where you can ground yourself in your body and your mind and your spirit, and get some really great benefits. And I think mindfulness practice is really popular at the moment because it's different to what we've experienced over a long time. And you experienced, was it 15 years in the mental health system, which is diagnosis, medication, treatment. It's putting you in a locking you away and forgetting about you type thing, which I think we're slowly moving away from that kind of process, but it's going to be a long journey still to get to a great space in the mental health community. But what about, like, because you've moved around a bit by the sound of it, like growing up, where did you grow up, and and I always like to ask this question, like where you grew up, what was mental health discussions like, or were they pretty much non-existent?
Pretty much non-existent. And as a child, I was raised in Adelaide, and I was mentally and physically abused. And
Mhm.
also by the age of 12, I was sexually abused by a neighbour. Certainly, I've got past trauma, and
Mm.
we all have trauma. I don't think anyone's exempt from trauma. And yeah, so by the age of 16, well, I stole my father's car and left and went interstate and never returned for 4 years.
Mhm.
So, and I ended up at Ardlethan Tin Mines, not far from Wagga Wagga.
Mhm.
And then I met my first wife, and we raised a family in Wagga Wagga, until age 30, when I smashed up, actually, and that changed my life. But
Yeah.
yeah, so I was doing well, until that day. And the truck I was driving was not. I had no workers' compensation insurance. The
Mhm.
guy I was driving for never had me insured or anything, so I was pretty much pensioned off then too, or went on to sickness benefits. Yeah, it was a pretty hard road.
Yeah.
So I really believe that I think every person that's ever come to me for a session, and people only need one 90-minute session with me, and away they go and start their mindful practice, and that they get their lives back. They also get a copy of my book, and
Mhm.
with it, I've written a couple of books and working on a third one.
Yeah.
Mindful Actions was my first book, which it's just a little book. I put The Ripple Effect on the cover in
Wonderful.
2014. And then I started with this book.
Mhm.
So, and come up with a 52-week journey.
Yeah.
And I expanded my first book actually from 27 chapters into 52. I've been delivering this for about 5 or 6 years as a 52-week mentoring service.
Mhm.
And every Friday I send out a mindful insight, and then people, for $12 a fortnight, that's all I charge. And then people phone me regularly, and I keep them on track. And I sort of target people with diagnoses like schizophrenia, bipolar, hearing
Mhm.
voices,
Yep.
psychosis, anything like that, because they're often like me, stuck in the mental health system. It takes time. That's why I did it over 52 weeks.
Yep.
But I just love, after 4, 6, or 8 months, it's different for everyone. But without fail, people get their lives back. I love it
Yeah.
when they say, "Oh, John, I get it now," because they really get what mindful practice is all about. The penny drops for them,
Mhm.
and that's usually their moment of spiritual awakening, if you like. Yeah, when
Yeah.
they kind of awaken to the truth.
Well,
Not like me. I was certainly in the dark to the truth for 15 years, and then
yeah.
I stepped from the dark into the light. For 25 years now, I've been walking in the light and fulfilling my purpose, I really believe.
The 15 years that you're stuck in the mental health system. So Talk us through what you mean by stuck. Like, what was it like? Were you institutionalized? Were you out in community? Like, what did it look like for you?
Yeah, I wasn't always unwell, but I think 6 times I spent time in a psych ward. You're not allowed to call it that anymore. It's a mental health unit. And yeah, the whole thing of being medicated, having 10-minute appointments with psychiatrists, because that's all they can really do. Honestly, you can't do much in 10 minutes anyhow. And I know, because for 10 years, well, not these days, or not since COVID came along, I used to go to Coffs Harbour Mental Health Unit and conduct yarning circles with the inpatients. And we used to have a yarn. And I know from talking to inpatients and my own experience, they don't get the truth. Psychiatrists don't get the truth. Like, just one aspect of that is they're not told what drugs people are taking. They might be smoking dope or smoking ice or whatever, taking drugs, but because that's illegal, they never talk about that to the mental health professionals. And then they're given medication, and then when they get out, they go back to their old habits, and then they've got a concoction of the drugs they're taking, and as well as the medication. And that can have dire consequences sometimes. That's just one aspect. But I know people were very, very thankful for what I shared with them in yarning circles. And that's a bit of an Aboriginal thing, if you're not familiar with it, Simon. A yarning circle where there's no real leader, even though I was, but we have a topic of the day. Traditionally, a yarning circle was called when there's an issue in a tribe, and then they go around the circle and everybody gives their thoughts on the issue. And then if they're all agree, it's passed and change happens. If they don't all agree, then it goes around the circle again and again, and they yarn until they come to a solution. It'd be good if politics was like that, wouldn't it?
It would be very good. It sounds almost like common sense, doesn't
it? Yeah. So anyhow, it's all good like that.
Yeah. And you mentioned a really good point there in terms of you weren't always unwell over that 15 years, and highlights mental health. I like to refer to it as a roller coaster. It's up and down. You have good times and bad times. Sometimes you're on medication, sometimes you're not on medication, or sometimes you're in therapy, or sometimes you're not in therapy, all those types of things. So how did you manage coming off medication? Because I know on your website, you talk about coming out of that system and off of medication through mindfulness. Is like, what was that journey like for you to realize that there's alternative ways to healing?
Yeah, well, I've witnessed heaps of people getting off medication through mindfulness as well since then. Like you said, yeah, it's like a roller coaster. I certainly relate to that. And there's times when I was well, and but I was sort of pensioned off. So I started volunteering, with a local youth refuge. I did volunteer work, which led to me getting paid work. 10 years I was a mentor in juvenile justice before I retired in Grafton. There's a juvenile justice centre there. And also volunteered with the Smith family, and they taught me that was my first course in counselling, actually, because people used to come in for handouts with the Smith family. Yeah, they had counselling as well. And we used to just sort of, ask why they needed a handout for one thing. And a common story I heard, actually, I'll just share this. It was mostly women coming in for cash or food handouts because the man had, through addictions, lost everything. Whether it was gambling, drugs, whatever. I learned a lot in those days. That was my first sort of counselling course that I did. Yeah, roller coaster. That's the best way to explain it. Yeah.
Have you been off medications for a while, or you're back onto medication?
No, I haven't had any medications really since 1998. I was still taking it for a little while at the end of 97, but early 98 now I went off and No, I haven't looked back. I never give advice on medications, not my place to. But
Yeah.
I
I
say to
know.
people, don't rely on what other people are telling you. Other people might be telling you you need them, but go within,
Yeah,
heart test it if you like. And I
that's
often
right.
share heart testing because when we have difficult decisions to make, and that is a difficult decision probably in itself, but it could be relationships or changing jobs or moving house, those things that take up a lot of mind space,
Mm-hmm.
then heart test it. Whatever's on our mind, just put your fist on your heart, pause your mind, and really feel it.
Yeah.
Then you kind of have a knowing that it comes through, and then you'll know, yep, this is the way to go. Yep.
Yeah.
Or like I often say, any doubt, leave it out.
It's a great way to look at it, because medication is one of those taboo topics. It's one of those things that people don't want to talk about. I probably held off going to get help for 5 to 10 years because in the back of my mind, I'm like, I don't want to be on medication if there is something wrong. I don't want to be one of those people that has to take a pill every day to manage things. And eventually I just got over that and went and got help. Medication now for me is just a normal thing for me. I don't see any shame in it, but it's not also the only way, as you say. Like, there's, mindfulness can help us break from that. You've been off of medication for a long time, which is a great highlight point to say that it doesn't have to be forever as well. It could be just for a little time. Medication might not be for you. It could be something completely different. There's East and Western versions and traditional ways of healing. There's not just what we're told by medical professionals, psychiatrists, doctors. It's not the only truth in the world as well. So you really touched on some good points there.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's, a lot of people love their medications, whether they just genuinely believe they're good for them or it relaxes them and it works. And that's fantastic. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not knocking medications, never. But then there's other people who have probably formed a new addiction to their medications too. So yeah, it's a very broad sort of subject, that one.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about mindfulness, and I'd love to hear what it means to you to its core.
Well, mindfulness is a deceptively simple practice, and I say deceptive because a lot of people think it's too simple. It couldn't possibly work.
Yeah.
Deceptively simple practice, which connects you, it keeps you in the present moment, and the more you practice, the more you live in the present moment, and life stops passing you by. You stop living on autopilot. You start doing things with purpose and more consciously.
Mm-hmm.
So, and mindfulness, what it means to me is everything. Boy, I know where I've come from to where I've been for probably the last 25 years.
Yeah.
From 1997, I reconnected with myself, my true self, my authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
I set my intention on others. And when we do this, the universe sort of picks up on it somehow and starts moving the furniture for us.
Yeah.
I've been living a life of synchronicities, and I'm certainly not the only one, because I don't believe there's any such thing as coincidences. So mindfulness is my world. I've made it that way, simply through practice.
Yeah.
And I know in the early days, I made up my mind to connect spiritually every morning.
Mm-hmm.
And back then I used to say, what are we doing today, Lord? And then, because I had a few years in Christianity, if you like, and then I sort of saw the big picture. And these days, every morning and without fail, I've always done this. I say, what are we doing today, Sol? S-O-L. It's an ancient Roman word for the sun. Yep. I see the sun as my source energy, and also I see, well, the sun is source energy for the whole planet too.
Mm-hmm.
And when you consider that everything is connected, we're all connected and connected with everything. Anyhow, that's just me. It makes sense to me. What are we doing today, Sol? And then I pause my mind, see what drops in. It's amazing. And it's almost like I get daily instruction. Sometimes it's do nothing today, have a rest, because rest is important too. Or it might be, work on a book or whatever, start an organization. I started mindfullymad.org in about 2015. And that's an organization where you can find a mindfulness mentor. I train mentors, and people can get a free listing there. You're welcome to as well, Simon.
Yeah, okay.
And also, there's a certificate course, and our vision, or the vision I shared, and many other people sort of followed it as well, was world mental health without medication. So we'll probably never be able to achieve that, but we can certainly work towards it. And part of our purpose is getting mindfulness into schools, which is happening now. Which is fantastic, because I started lobbying government in 2014, probably. And probably prior to that. And I wasn't the only one. It's finally it's happening. So mindfullymad.org.
Yeah, we'll put the website and also to the books as well in the show notes, so that people can link into those if they want to after the show. But you actually touched on some things like, what are we doing today, Sol? So what's some of the things, the everyday things that you do from a mindfulness approach? Maybe if you're feeling anxious or a bit not present, like what's some of the things you might do on a day-to-day from a mindfulness approach?
Well, another word for mindfulness is awareness. And as we develop awareness, especially of what our mind is doing, in other words, we start to really take notice of what our mind is doing. And if our mind is being unhelpful or negative, for example, or bringing up past trauma, especially, then we notice that. And the important thing to do is not do anything with it, just notice it. And then take our mind to values, like you mentioned earlier, as in ACT therapy. Take our mind to a value, because we've worked out 4 or 5 core values. Go to a value and make an action plan. And many, many years ago, I learned something. Imagine yourself at your own funeral. This helps work out what your values are. You can do this little exercise. Imagine yourself at your own funeral. There you are, laying in the casket, and imagine your loved ones standing there. And then imagine what you would like your loved ones to be saying about you. That helps work out what your values are. And I know when I did this exercise many years ago, it was like, I saw my kids standing there and they were saying, Dad always had time for us. So that became a value. So then when the unhelpful or negative thought shows up, we be mindful, we pause our mind, and then go to a value and make an action plan, like plan a picnic for the weekend, or swim in the river or whatever. And that way it shifts your mind, because we need to do that. And these days I come up with a therapy of my own. It's called ragtherapy.com, actually. RAG therapy, and RAG stands for resistance, acceptance, and gratitude. So it's one especially for people with addictions. When we notice we're being resistant, especially to change, then we accept it, because acceptance is very powerful on its own. Hence, acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT. We accept it, and whatever comes along in our thoughts, we accept that too. Doesn't matter what shows up, how good or bad, we accept it. And then we go to gratitude, just like we go to values, and start thinking of some things we're grateful for. Because there's a million things, honestly. We never run out of things to be grateful for. And once again, that helps. And it's important to do that, because if we don't, being mindful is not enough to just pause and connect. That's the practice. But we still need to take our mind somewhere, because otherwise it could go straight back where it was. And we don't necessarily want that. We want to live in flow. So we go to gratitude or a value. And that way we really develop a powerful practice, a practice for life, for living. And it's amazing. And then those things that used to show up, which we sometimes dwell on, or really overthink it, or whatever, those sorts of thoughts can turn into real monsters and can actually cause people to suicide even. That's how ruthless they can be. But when we start accepting them, taking no notice and taking our mind somewhere else, they start showing up less frequently. They
Yeah.
lose their power.
Yeah.
So because we're not giving them the power. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty and the powerful aspect of a deceptively simple practice.
Yeah. Do you do anything like meditation or yoga or breath work or anything like that?
Well, as you would know, when I had a very, very busy mind, 24/7, blah, 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 there's no way I could meditate.
Yeah.
But these days I do. And usually it's first thing in the morning. I might lay in bed for up to an hour just meditating. Yeah. We don't have to sit cross-legged, in a cave to be enlightened, that's for sure, for 5 years. But so meditation and mindfulness are different, because meditation is more formal. It's something we've got to make time to do.
Yeah.
But mindfulness becomes us. And throughout my day, doesn't matter what I'm doing, where I am, who I'm with, even with a client, if my mind wants to take me away somewhere, no, I notice that and I come back to the present moment and practice presence, because presence in itself is very powerful. It's the greatest gift we can give our loved ones, that's for sure. But also all our friends, our clients, whatever, as well. Presence. Yeah. Once again, it's a very simple thing. But
Now, I know we talked a bit about, before we started the recording today, about you move up to the Hervey Bay. Did you want to, while we're on the show, give a bit of a plug as to what you're doing in the front room of your house and what you're doing in Hervey Bay and servicing the community up there?
Yeah, my wife and I have set up, my wife named it saffronsounds.com.au. That's the name of our business. And we've set up the formal lounge room of the house we purchased. It's very central in Hervey Bay. Sound therapy instruments, gongs and crystal singing bowls, brass singing bowls, crystal harp, crystal pyramids, and various chimes, and a tribal drum as well. And what we're going to be doing, and we've practiced so far on friends and what have you, and a few neighbours now. Next month, we're probably going to start offering sound baths or sound therapy. And when you get immersed in these sounds for 45 minutes, there is no deeper meditation. It really takes you almost to another galaxy, if you like, as you're taking in the sounds. It's an amazing and very therapeutic. Yeah. Wonderful. So we're looking forward to doing that.
I'll put the link to that as well in the show notes, in case anyone's local or anyone's passing through Hervey Bay. If I'm ever up in Hervey Bay, I'll make sure to drop in and give it a go myself as well.
You'd be very welcome, Simon. That's for sure.
That'd be amazing. A couple more questions and I'll let you go, John. So what's some advice that you could give to someone who's been struggling, maybe mentally or spiritually or anything really? They've listened to the show today and they're thinking about giving you a call, but they're hesitating. What would you like them to know to help them make that phone call to you?
I've got a linked address, and you go there and then it's got links to all sorts of things. So if they go to that link, they can actually, you'll find a link in there to actually set up a half-hour Zoom appointment. It's free. And just have a yarn with me. Sometimes that's all people need. And good enough. Or they can schedule a 90-minute appointment, and we'll get them cracking on their practice. They need one session with me, because people go away and start their practice, and I know from feedback, people get it.
Yeah.
And, or they can sign up to my mentoring service, $12 a fortnight, over 52 weeks, that one, and then they can phone or use WhatsApp video to my phone regularly, just to keep them on track, especially if they're on something, if they've had some of those diagnoses. And I just love it, showing people the way. Mindfulness doesn't heal anything. It's not, but it gives us the tools to be able to handle whatever shows up, whatever comes along in life, because shit will happen. That's not if, it will, for all of us. That's life.
Yeah.
But it's what we do with that, how we handle it mentally. And the big thing, mindfulness, for me, it's helped me develop peace of mind and clarity of mind. Two things I never had. And when you've got that, well, happiness follows you around. It's actually like a byproduct of mindfulness, if you like. And I got that from Russ Harris, and it's quite true. Yeah. So thanks, Simon.
No, not a problem. The last question, I always like to throw it over to the guest to plug something that makes them feel good as well. So it could be a resource, something you're reading, or a TV show, or something you're listening to on the radio, something that makes you feel good, so that other people might go, oh yeah, I wouldn't mind reading that or watching that or listening to that.
It's different for anything, but whatever the thing that you do, which keeps you fully absorbed, which is mindfulness as well, in a mindful state, that's the thing, whether it's music or sport or, exercise, or could be anything. And do that. For me, I live for spiritual buzz. And I'll just explain that. Spiritual buzz, I usually only get that really when I'm sharing with someone or helping someone. And then a lot of people call it goosebumps. And we get that, it's like our whole body sort of goes goosebumpy, but I call it spiritual buzz. And it's better than any drug, when you just get that, oh, yeah. But really, the only way I get that is sharing with people. It's almost like the universe is pleased with what I'm doing or saying, and then I get that feeling. And often the other person gets it as well, and you experience it together. And that's kind of what I live for. That's awesome. The best feeling in the world. And I think I first noticed it on 16th of May 1990 when I made a hole-in-one. So there you go. And I've got that. I used to call it a hole-in-one feeling back then, because I didn't really realize what it was. But yeah, wow.
I love that. I love it. But you just highlighted a great point, just connecting with people and chatting, having a yarn, I'm getting the goosebumps now. I don't know if it's I'm getting if it's what you're describing or whatever. But it's just been a great conversation, John. And so thankful that you reached out and said that you wanted to come on and share your story. And I've been looking forward to this chat for a very long time now. So I'm glad we finally got here and that you're well and you're up in Hervey Bay now, a bit warmer weather. It's coming. But thanks so much. And what I'll do is I'll share your links in the show notes. So if anyone wants to check them out, we look forward to the episode coming out. And thanks so much for your time this morning.
Yeah, I'll share it on social media as well and promote what you're doing, Simon. So
thank you.
Awesome.
No, that'll be great.
I'll just finish by saying, be mindful, pause, connect.
Well, that's a wrap for today's episode, and I hope you got some value from it. If anything triggered your mental health today, please reach out to your support networks. Also, if you loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your mates. For more from Mindful Men, you can check us out on Instagram and YouTube, and I'll throw the links to these pages in the show notes below. But until next time, stay mindful.